Hey, do you want to be good in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Well, here's 5 reasons why you'll never be good. Actually, if you avoid these 5 mistakes, you're going to get good at Jiu-Jitsu. So if you want to improve your Jiu-Jitsu, you got to listen to this podcast right now. Subscribe, hit the notifications button, and you're going to get a lot of great content. But
if
Dan,
you do any of these 5 things, though, you will never be good.
never-
And I
let's
don't
be
want to
clear, Dan. Do you have to do all 5 to not be good?
No, any of
You
the
do
5
any of
you will
these.
not. And I don't want to brag. I think I do all 5. So
You're covering your bases.
I did all 5 things to stop me from being good at jiu-jitsu.
So let's clarify for our listeners, our viewers. I didn't come up with this. You found this article, 5 reasons why somebody will never be good at jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
You're going to I don't even know what the information is, but I'm going to help people navigate through this and get good at jiu-jitsu.
Right. And I think some of them I read it, and it sounds pretty obvious, but I think there's some nuance that maybe we can bring out of these points.
I like it.
Like, because it's sort of like, so here's point 1. And I'll say, before I even say the point, that it'll seem like, well, that's obvious, but I think we can.
Dan, where did we get this article? Do you know?
It's called BJJ Eastern Europe.
Yeah, they're a popular website. They
Right.
have a lot of great articles.
Right.
They're on Facebook too or whatever. Yeah, awesome.
All right. So should we go?
Let's go. Hit me.
All right. First one, again, seems obvious. You're not showing up.
Right,
That's it.
right.
What I would say is, of course, again, obvious, but what it means is you're not showing up enough. And it sounds like, well, duh, of course. But speaking for myself, again, you don't have much exposure to this. You run the gym. You show up all the time by definition. Right. I think there were periods where I would be depressed about my lack of progress. And then when I'd really stop and think, how often am I going? I'm like, it's not that often, you know?
Right.
It was sporadic. I'd
Yeah.
put it that way. It'd be like, I feel like I'm going and I'm not progressing. And then when I stopped and thought, how often am I really in here? It'd be like, well, this week was 3, but last week was 2. The week before was 2. And the week before that was 1. And I can't make it next week. And I'm like, wait, I'm averaging like 2 at the moment.
That's interesting.
You know, and I'd be like, so it seems obvious, but I think it can kind of sneak up on you.
Could totally sneak up on you.
And it can snowball where you're getting in a worse mood about your performance, so you don't feel like going in. So you don't go in.
You're demotivated.
You know, or you come up with some reason. You're like, it's not my knees bothering me, whatever it is. You don't come in, and then you go in, you go in later, you go in the next week, and you're getting even worse. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, and it's just a snowball effect where you're not really identifying, well, I'm not showing up.
Right.
You know, you don't really spot it. You're just like, I just suck, and it's not getting better.
Yeah, interesting. Like some academies track attendance of their students. I don't do that just because I'm too lazy. And
it also seems like, what will you do with that information? You know, like if you...
I think you're supposed to reach out to people if they haven't been in for a while, encourage them to come in maybe. Probably not a bad idea, but I'm not doing it. There's also, I heard, you can get an app for your phone, Dan, where you somehow record all your training sessions. So I was talking to one of our students, who was it? Jason Allen, Jay Allen, great guy, really good purple belt. And he was doing that. So he had his whole year of training down. And like anything, the more you measure something, you're more likely to improve in that aspect.
It's a little like our calendars for weight loss, which we haven't spoken
Jerry
of in a
Seinfeld
while.
It's
a resurgence of the calendar idea. But the idea was like I would.
How is your weight, by the way, Dan?
Oh, it's great. It's very.
It's like the stock market.
Yeah, it's been going up.
It's like GameStop.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Impressive is the best word I'd say. It's high.
So I usually order an annual calendar that I can put on my door or my wall. And I think it's like 2 feet by 4 feet or something. So I went on Amazon.
Wait, that's a big calendar.
It's big. I like that. Yeah. So you could see each day. I can write my weight in the day or whatever I want to do. I put a big X on it, do the Jerry Seinfeld method. And I ordered my calendar through Amazon, and it arrived, and it was like this big. It was like a freaking postage stamp.
So to this day, are you like
well, it's
putting
just
little
January.
tiny
No,
mugs?
I put it up on my fridge, and But
for those listeners who are unfamiliar with the calendar concept, it's that you can put anything. You have the calendar up. You can put an X for anything. Like, did I work
Right.
out that day? What I was doing was an X for a work. Well, or this or vice versa. X for a workout, or a 0 for clean eating. You know, like I'd circle the X. I
Yeah.
think it was the reverse. I think I did an X for clean eating, and then I'd circle it if I worked out that day. And then the reality of what you're doing stares you in the face. And this,
Right.
of course, applies to jiu-jitsu, or applies to anything you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
You know, you can't be like, why aren't I getting stronger? If you look at the calendar and you're like, oh, I've only
Yeah.
worked out like twice.
You have a
know?
physical representation of what you've been doing. Yeah.
Right. And at the minimum, then you could at least look and go, I have been doing it and I'm not getting better. But I don't think it'll happen, right? I bet you would look at that calendar, most people that felt they weren't getting better and were like, they'd look at it and say, I haven't been going in as much as I thought. You know?
Definitely. Yeah. Anybody. I think the beauty of whether it's one of these apps tracking your attendance or a calendar that's up on the wall staring at you is it's going to draw it to your attention sooner than you would otherwise realize it. You could go, oh, gee, I haven't been in 2 weeks. Wow, I got to get
For
in
me,
there.
it was a big motivator, and I'm breaking the calendar back out because of the aforementioned weight. So I got on a scale recently, and it was not good. It wasn't the number was high.
I'm way heavy, but I do recall at one point you were lighter than
right,
me.
and I'm still not. Although you are way heavy,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Me being yet way heavier than that. So I've got a lot of work to do. So I got to break the calendar back out
I think you're up 20,
I know you're
20 pounds maybe, huh?
from my best weight or optimal weight.
Yeah.
20 pounds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I still don't think I look massively different, but like,
No, you don't look different at all. That's part of the problem.
yeah.
Right?
So I've got to, but I know I can lose it. So, but the calendar's back in. I'm going to
Nice.
clean eating, workouts. It'll come,
Cool.
you know?
Nguyen uses one of those apps too, and he noticed that I think last year he did less actual total hours of training, but because he changed his approach, he felt he made even more progress. So
Right.
it's all good data, all good information to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this thing about when you start getting, like I was saying, the snowball, when you start not showing up, you can start, I think the most common thing when you're not showing up, I was always someone that was like, I'm getting depressed about my jiu-jitsu, so I think I suck. I'm not, I'm showing up less because of that. I think that's not that common. I think most people start coming up with other reasons, even in their own head, definitely to you, and then even in their own head about why they're not showing up. And they don't say any of these things. They just start saying, you know what, work's been tough. And, and I really,
What I think
they
can
start
happen-
coming up with other reasons.
Well, I think something else can happen, Dan. When we're away for a while, we feel like, oh, my training partners have made gains that I'm away. So when I come back, I'm going to be facing the reality of I'm behind everybody else. So that creates a reluctance to come back, which just makes the problem even worse.
Yeah.
It's a vicious circle.
I know I've been
Or
away a
cycle,
while.
yeah.
It's going to be ugly. I just, like you said, it's just mental preparation and expectation management, right? Like,
Frame your expectations. Yeah. You
it's
don't
just
have
like,
to keep
I
up
gotta
with
go, like,
everyone
I'm
else.
just going to get beaten by a lot of people, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
That's what else could happen? I mean,
No. You're going to come in and we're going to be focusing on developing some part of the game. Could be passing the half guard, something like this. And you're going to learn something that day. And you're
Yeah.
going to go, oh, that was good. That's awesome. You aren't going to come in and we're not going to have a tournament. We're not going to do the Dan Robin Memorial Tournament and have you match
we're not
up
doing
with
that
everybody.
anymore.
We're not going to do that.
Okay.
When I was a white and blue belt, I went through a period where I started doing a lot of training. So I went from training 3 times a week to basically training at least once a day and sometimes twice a day. And man, my progress went through the roof at that point in time. So, I mean, it just makes sense.
We've
It's
seen it with a
obvious.
bunch of people,
Yeah.
right? The early days of when Jesse and Matt Tullos were coming in.
Oh, right.
They started coming in every day, and you just saw their
Right.
skills, and a lot of other people, but those two
Yeah,
come to mind.
definitely. And, my son too.
Yeah.
Yeah, his progress has been pretty dramatic. So yeah, the more you can train, obviously, the more you can progress. And
Track this showing up, keep at it, keep a consistent rate of coming in.
yeah, definitely.
And then again, it's always like, well, I can't because of this and that, but I think usually you can, right? Like usually there's a way. If you
Well, there's
want to.
another thing, Dan. This is what I wanted to say. Optimal learning, you need spaced repetition. So if those spaces get too large, then you lose the learning. So if you're coming in once a week or once every 2 weeks, or if you come in 3 times 1 week and then you skip 2 weeks, then the spacing between the learning is not optimal, and you're just not going to develop as quickly. And your class, the instructor is probably going to be onto some other part of jiu-jitsu. So you came in for 3 classes of passing the half guard, you don't show up for 2 weeks, you come back and now they're doing escaping mount and back control. You didn't get the repetitions you needed on the first thing that you looked at. So you're just not going to get the benefit of your training without that consistency of training.
And the flip side of that, though, is something's better than nothing, right? Like, if you're like, I can only make it once this week.
I just said that to somebody today. They came in late to class, and they go, sorry, I'm late. I go, hey, no problem. Come late if you have to, leave early if you have to. Some training is better than no training.
Right. So that's another way to avoid that cycle of like, I can only come in once the next couple weeks, so forget it. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not even worth it. I'm not going to, it's sort of like, just go in anyway.
Just come in, definitely. And in our academy, Dan, we're very informal. So some places you come in, they make you stand at the edge of the mat and get sort of bowed in by the instructor before they even allow you to walk on the mat. Yeah, I don't do that. Yeah. Just come in and be an adult, be respectful, and try to develop yourself. So, yeah, you got to show up.
So if one reason you'll never be good at jiu-jitsu is you're not showing up. 2, the follow-up is you think showing up is good enough. And
I think
talked about this one before.
Yeah.
Because, again, we've mentioned on here before, there's this idea that if you just keep showing up, and I think I've said it, and you've probably said it, like, so it's not like you're really misguided.
I've never said that.
You've never said showing up?
Just kidding, yeah.
You've never probably said showing up is good enough, but it's sort of like, the idea is like, just keep showing up and you'll get there.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? Or like, just put in the mat time.
Right.
And you'll get there. I've heard that a million times, and it sounds like sensible, right? Like, just put in the mat time.
Right.
But we've discussed, that's almost like early jiu-jitsu thought that has evolved, right? Like, that it's not just showing up.
Correct.
And I think you've talked a lot about about that point, that there's things you need to be doing when you show up.
I think there's 2 ways to look at it, Dan. One is the student has to come with deliberate intention to develop themselves. So you got to come with a purpose and a sense of urgency. The nervous system needs to be at a certain level of excitement for optimal performance. If you're a power lifter, maybe you have to be as excited as possible. Maybe they put ammonia tablets up their nose or something and get berserk excited, and they can lift a huge weight. If you want to learn something new, if you want to learn jiu-jitsu, your mind needs to be excited enough, but your body needs to be kind of relaxed. You can't be in a stress response where you're so stressed out you can't use your prefrontal cortex. You can't think clearly. So you got to be able to think clearly, but you can't be sleepy either. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't. You can't smoke it up and come in high and expect to develop yourself and get better.
Just lost a bunch of
listeners. But you need to have.
What do you mean I can't come in high? Like,
and you have to come in and I talk about on this podcast, you have to have responsibility for your own development. So you got to come in ready and prepared to develop, and ready to take on the lesson of the day and try to develop it. Yeah.
So again, I think it sounds, you say like you need to focus on learning something that class, and it sounds obvious, but I think I would constantly not do that.
Yeah.
I think I would constantly come in and be shown something and, work it through with the partner and then start rolling, and sometimes even working through the sweep with the partner or whatever you're shown. Say it's a pass you're being shown. Sometimes it would even be like, I don't think I'm going to really use this pass, we'll just sort of go through it,
Yeah.
and then we'll. I
Just
kind of.
sample it here and then discard
I'm kind of
it.
looking forward to the roll afterwards. And
Yeah.
I'll just.
See, that's the other part of it, Dan. So the student has to come in with a sense of urgency, an attitude that they're deliberately going to develop themselves, and then they have to come into a place that has the training structured properly, where they're not wasting time. You're training in the right way, doing a fair amount of positional training, and you're getting a lot of live positional training, so you can develop yourself. You know, you're building your game one little piece at a time, one little brick at a time. So the positional training is essential for that, so you can minimize the variables and you can understand what's working and what's not working.
And I think this way you're putting it, of like come in with an intention of developing. People dance around it like it's the full sort of way of looking at it. What I mean is, like, even in this article, they sort of say, focus and pay attention and don't be talking with other people and spacing out. But I think what they mean, which is valid, but I think what they mean is, if you have this intention of learning something, these other ways, like focusing and not talking to your friend, and it will come with that. You'll be like, I'm here to learn, so I don't want to space out and think about funny cat videos and like while the instructor's talking, because I'm trying to learn it.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm a good example of doing all the wrong things, John. That's one of my values to this podcast, that I remember there'd be times the instructor's going off and I'm like, it's one of those things, like all of a sudden it's like, so, and what do we do then at that point? And I'm like, what, where am I? Like, they turn to me and they're like, and after we put the hand on the knee, what do we do then? And I'm like, if he calls on me, I'm like, I don't even remember where I am.
Well,
right
that's
now.
part
like,
of.
What am I doing? Training jiu-jitsu? Let me get base here.
Well, that's part of good instruction as well. So you have to give the presentation. You have to give enough information and enough details that people can start to understand the position. But you can't drone on too much that people are clicking off, fading out.
Yeah.
If I see my students starting to recline and they're lying, supporting their head in their hand, and they're lying down, that means I'm going on too long. So as an instructor, I have an obligation to keep my students interested and on their toes, and entertain them a little bit, I guess, but I can't be indulging myself by just blathering on. I got to think about, we're here to develop. What do these students need? How can I get them the information they need? How can I get them into the right training methods and modalities so they can develop? That's the key. And I've talked about this guy before, this John Wooden, greatest college basketball coach of all time. He notoriously had practices, that were shorter than his competitors, but they were well-designed practices. So they'd come in with a sense of urgency. We're going to do this for 5 minutes, this for 10 minutes, and so forth, and then we're done, and then get out. So he developed a culture in an environment when people came in, they were ready to go. They weren't just strolling in and kind of stretching out a little bit and warming up. Everything was dialed in. And that sense of urgency by the instructor and the students is going to maximize the development.
Yeah. And I never thought about that like you're almost the reverse side of this as the instructor.
Yeah.
Like, as each thing we're saying, as a student, this is what you need to do. You're thinking as an instructor, this is what I need to facilitate.
Definitely.
Right? Like, I
Definitely.
need to help them do these things.
Right. Have to facilitate it. That's a good way to put it. Exactly. If I'm boring and I'm blathering on, how focused can you be? Like, there's limits to human attention. I have to respect that. I have to respect my students' time, and I have to respect their attention. I got to get to the point, and I got to get them developing themselves.
Right.
And I always have that in my classes. I have that sense of urgency, and I sometimes if I have a room of, say, right now it's smaller, maybe I have 10 or 12 people, and one person is seemingly like they're not as focused, and they're taking up my time, asking me an unfocused question because they didn't really pay attention to the presentation, then I get a little irritated because I'm thinking, you're stealing time from these other students. Come on, get on point. Everyone else is on point. Focus.
Right.
Yeah.
Then there are certain students, right, that just do it relentlessly, I think.
Do what's that?
Like, ask sort of vague or inane questions, or...
Yeah, I mean, if we start structuring everything properly, it cuts down on that,
Right.
because Yeah, I don't want to open. Anybody have any questions whatsoever? No, that doesn't make
Yeah,
any
right.
sense. Basically, what we do, Dan, is we present the information, and then we do active recall. So we say, what do we do next? What do you? And then everyone knows how to do it. And we say, let's go with our partners and train this. And we clap our hands and we go. I don't really ask for questions because there shouldn't be any questions. We just showed you what to do. Do it.
Right.
And you're right. If somebody is a completely inexperienced white belt, they could have questions that aren't useful. You know,
Right.
not all questions are useful. So
Right.
let's get them, and then we help the individuals. And if the individual's struggling with the position, then we can help them. You know, then whatever questions will become obvious. Then,
Right.
yeah. Not everyone needs the same information. That's the other thing. I like to get people working as soon as possible, so I can help them as an individual. I think martial arts are best taught on an individual basis, if you think about it, right? Like a professional fighter isn't in a classroom of 20 people learning how to fight. He has a trainer that's teaching him specifically what he needs to do to be a good fighter.
Right.
You know, I was over with crew Mark DellaGrotte, training with him, and the training is amazing, but it's obvious when you're in that situation, like this is really how martial arts and fighting is meant to be learned, like almost on a one-to-one basis. So we have to set up our classes where we get into that teaching modality as much as possible. We don't have anyone sitting against a wall listening to me lecture for half an hour.
Right.
Like we present information, you start to do it, and then we can go over there and help you in your personal way of doing what we're trying to do.
Right. And I did think of another side point, but
Mhm.
this could be brought up in a lot of our podcasts. Because I was just thinking when I said, and some people ask a lot of inane questions. One thing we've both noticed is that whenever we say something like that, someone thinks we're talking about them, right? Like whenever we say something negative, where we're like, there's some people that do this. And to my knowledge, we've basically never been thinking of an
Some
individual.
people consider this podcast a personal attack on them.
Yeah, like whenever we say something negative about anything, about like it could be a human trait. We could be talking about, you know, someone losing their temper. We could talk about how someone dresses. We could talk about how people do jujitsu or how people interrupt class. We get word back that's like someone's like mad that
they
think we
meant
were
me
talking
there.
about them.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever. The only time I've been thinking about someone is when I've told a story where I'm like, this happened with me and this one guy.
Right.
But if I haven't said that, and we're just sort of saying like some people drone on, I'm not thinking of anything.
No.
You want to think it is like that? We've used this metaphor in another context where you have been teaching jiu-jitsu for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always picture it's like the beginning skier that falls off the lift.
Oh, right.
And and they're like, that is so humiliating. All the good skiers are laughing at me. And they don't realize that the good skiers are like, I've seen a million people fall off a lift. I'm not, you're not even registering.
Doesn't register. Yeah.
And so the follow-up point is what I'm saying now, where it's like, if then a ski instructor is talking and being like, yeah, there's beginners that just like fall off the lift and they all laugh. Someone's like, oh, he means me. Like that guy saw me fall off the lift. He means me. And they don't realize it's like, you've seen 100 people do that. And like, you're not thinking of that person.
Yeah. A lot of people can be a little self-conscious in general. I can't tell you, Dan, how many students over the years have come to me and they say, John, you see, I'm a very slow learner. I can't see something once and do it. I got to see it a couple times, and then I got to practice it a bunch of times before I can do it. And then I have to break the news to them. Yeah, you're exactly average. That's what the average student has to do. There's nothing special about you. You're doing fine, and you're very average in your learning, which is fine.
Yeah.
But most people have that thing. They think that everyone's picking it up so quickly, and they're not getting it, which usually is not the case. It could be occasionally, but usually not. Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of combining a couple of these points, I've seen it too, where people feel bad. They're like, so-and-so in the gym is improving so much faster than me. And sometimes there's people that are really good, natural.
Of course.
But sometimes I think more commonly, I've seen people like, man, this guy's getting better so much faster than me. And I'm like, they're coming in twice as much as you.
Right.
Or they're doing one of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Or they could just be naturally more athletic
that
than
happens
you.
too. Yeah.
That happens, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just athletic, it's sometimes particular to grappling, like a sense
Yeah.
for grappling
Yeah.
that you don't have. Maybe they're not even a great athlete.
Right.
I think some of the top jiu-jitsu guys in the world are amazing athletes, but I don't know if they're all football and baseball stars, and you know what I mean? Like they might just have this
Maybe not. Yeah.
knack for grappling.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. So show up, train consistently, and come
Showing up
prepared,
is not gonna,
focused, and deliberate.
is that all we've done, the two?
That's it. What's the third one? Why
I
you'll
think
never
it's
be-
combined with 2. 3 says you don't have a plan.
don't have a plan.
And I think it's very similar. We kind of merged
We did,
2 and
yeah.
3, right? Like, you know, it's
Here's where the individual plan can help Dan. Like, as a student, you show up to the academy, and if you're participating in a class, the instructor has an agenda for the class. But you could have an idea in your mind, you know, I really want to work on my leg locks. So when you get into your free rolling, whatever portion of that is, even if the instructor isn't covering leg locks at all, you could try to work yourself into those positions, you know. But yeah, you should have a plan. That's, you know, the other good thing about competing and competition is the specter of competing, a competition coming up can inform your training. You know, you could say, well, I really want to master this new takedown for that tournament. So that's going to be a big part of your plan, or some other element of your game to prepare for the tournament. So when you compete, it gives you that urgency, and it also probably show you what you want to work on, you know. But so if you have a competition, that's going to help you. If you don't have a competition, I suggest to people just to follow their enthusiasm. You know, if they're like, you know, I really want to do spider guard, it just seems cool to me, then great, then go for it. You know, there's no reason to resist your natural enthusiasm. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of the plan. Yeah.
So some of the plan is if the like in your gym now, the class gives you the plan, right? They're like, we're
Yeah.
going to go over.
But you should probably have your own plan as well. Although this is what coach is doing, so I'm going to work on this today. But I also had this part of my game I wanted to work on, and when the opportunity arises, I'm going to try to work on that part of my game.
Yeah. And you could get feedback from either just from your roles or from a coach that's like, right now my weakest part of my game is, you know, escaping side control or something. Like I need to get that down.
Yeah.
So even if we're doing passing, you're like, maybe during the free rolls, I got to
Yeah,
go back to trying to pull someone over and help me with that.
definitely. Yeah. Or even during a free roll, you could ask your training partner to train positionally with you, where you would start in the bottom of side control and work on getting out. That's what
Yeah.
I would definitely do. Yeah. I like that because you have a plan. It's all part of taking responsibility of your own development. Super important for a student.
Right. And also it helps. It sort of, to me, combines with this idea of focusing on developing each day you come in that I'm guilty of it again, where you come in and you're just sort of, your mind's just blank. You're just like there, like here I am in jiu-jitsu and just like going through whatever they're doing and then free rolling and then going home thinking, man, I suck today. And like, you know what I mean? That nothing was gained. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
If something was, it's certainly not ideal, or, you know, you maybe picked up one little thing. And so it's all of a piece to me of going in with a purpose.
So. You go in with purpose and a plan. The other good thing about it, Dan, which I've been talking about a lot lately, is if you have that purpose and plan, you can actually start to see your own development. So if you can see your development, where like, wow, I'm suddenly hitting sweeps from single leg X, and I was never doing that before, and now you're doing it, now you know you've developed. And if you don't do that, Dan, you know how people measure their development? They think about, am I getting over on my training partners? Or are they getting over on me? Which is not an accurate way to tell your own development, because they're developing at different rates.
Right.
And so it puts you in a trap. If you're focused on developing your techniques, and if you have a plan for specific techniques to develop them, even if you get tapped by everybody in the room, but like, yeah, but I hit these sweeps that I wasn't hitting before, you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to stay motivated. You know, the key to motivation is recognizing your own development. So if you have a plan, you're deliberate, you work your plan, you develop your game, you're going to stay motivated. You're going to feel good. If you're motivated, you're going to attend classes. So it's all part of the whole package.
Right. And I think it's easy to say, you said it's not healthy to be there, measuring yourself against the people you're rolling against, but it's extremely common, I think. Right.
Yeah,
it's like
it's the
overwhelmingly
default. Dan,
common.
we're gonna, we're very socially sensitive animals, so we're always going to be comparing ourselves to other people. But if you make the comparison about your own technique, your own game compared to what your game was like last week, that comparison is a healthy one. That's the one that you want to work on.
Right. Because you might even be like, even I consider myself, if I heard that criticism, I'd be like, I'm not competing against these guys. I'm like a friendly guy. I'm not hyper competitive. But when was I driving home thinking like, man, I suck? It's like probably someone did extra well against me.
Yeah.
Someone that was
Somebody got over on you.
Someone got over on me, or someone that was better than me got over on me more than they usually did, or something like that.
Yeah.
Some part of that comparison.
Right.
Or I think a huge mindset change is to be like, just try to not work, try to go in and work on some skills and
focus on technical issues and technique. Because then you can even admire when somebody gets over on you that didn't get over on you before. You can go, wow, the way you were passing me with that leg drag, you didn't do that before. Now you're super effective at that. I got to improve. Tyler King said that the other day. He's such a good training partner. He was working with these guys, and I was showing one of the students how to post on Tyler's shoulder and free their head, and they were making it hard for him to finish his pass that he likes to do. And he goes, son of a bitch, now I have to improve. I got to find a new pass because these guys are making this, used to be 100% successful. Now it's not 100% successful. Now he's got to develop his own game himself. And he recognized the benefit of that. He's like, he didn't go away with his head down. He's like, yeah, it's frustrating. I didn't get the result I'm used to getting, but now it's going to make me develop and get even better.
Right. And what do you think about as a side effect of this sort of mindset change? We've laughed here on this podcast how I used to be like, it was like, oh, it's really hard to choke Dan out. And then I'd like resist these chokes ferociously and go home like forgetting the number between 6 and 8. And like, I'd just be like, what's between, I'd be like, I resisted the choke, but now I have a pounding. I'm at a stoplight, like squinting my eyes because my head hurts. And like, probably there's like dark sections of my brain. And again, I think what feeds that is sort of this unhealthy idea of like, I'm not tapping to this. Yeah. Whereas I think the healthy way of looking at it is like, I won't tap if I'm interested in exploring how to get out of the choke, say, or if I'm interested in seeing what it takes to choke me out, like some purpose.
Right.
But do you know what I mean? Like
you're not simply resisting.
But I could
for
also
the sake
see
of
like
resisting.
I'm caught in this choke. I'm gonna tap. Like I'm trying to work on something else. You know what I mean?
Right. If you're caught in a choke, you should be trying to somehow untangle or untie the choke, not simply resist the choke, so you don't have to tap. Yeah.
Right, and then even if I'm like I can't figure out how to untangle it, I'm gonna tap even if I don't need. I'm not going unconscious, but I need to. I'm just gonna tap because I can't figure it out, and I'm just trying to figure it out.
And maybe I have to start escaping at a step before where I am right now.
And I've always thought about this: if you're at an advanced level and you go with someone who you're much below you, like a brand new white belt, and they have something good on you, like they got a triangle choke on, they did everything right. Mm-hmm. You could potentially just tap and be like, that was good. Like you know what I mean? Like I don't need to fight my way out and use,
Totally agree. Yeah.
And again, it's all if you have the mindset, right? The mindset of just trying to improve.
Definitely.
All right. Should we kind of
point 4.
This one's a little off, maybe not as interesting. Maybe there's some nuance you got out of it. It just says, again, reasons you will never be good at jiu-jitsu. You're constantly injured. That seems different to me because it's like, well, I mean,
that's dopey.
But I think the point,
with all due respect to BJJ Eastern Europe,
I think what the point they're trying to make is like stretch and like take care of yourself. Like,
well, Dan, there's another point that's interesting. I don't know if they elaborate under that point, but the quality of your training affects how you're going to get injured. So we have a white belt. Just talking to this guy, great guy, and Alex Rose, and he's really strong physical guy, and if he wants, he can go house, he can go berserk, and I was encouraging him to try to not go berserk, like slow down, you want to be more deliberate with your jujitsu so you can learn from it and you can replicate it. You know, if he's trying to pass the guard and he just goes berserk, and then, you know, it's like the Incredible Hulk. His brain goes black, and he wakes up with tattered clothing, and he's in a different location. You know, it's like he's on side control now. He's not in the
He
guard.
has no
and
idea
his
why.
Skis ripped because he became the Hulk. Yeah, he can't replicate that. That doesn't make any sense. You know, you can't grow. You can't develop yourself that way, and you increase the risk of injuring yourself and your training partner dramatically when you just go berserk.
Right. And jiu-jitsu wise, I see what happens, right? Because especially for bigger, stronger guys or more athletic guys, especially when they start, it's probably the most effective thing they can do, right?
It can be really effective.
They don't know
Yeah.
how else to get past something. They go berserk, and people can't stop it.
Right.
But at some point in development, when people are better, they'll be able to stop it.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't really work in the long run, and you exhaust yourself. The key part, though, is you're not developing. You're not getting any better.
Yeah.
And then you risk injury. So
Right.
you go berserk, somebody's on top of you, you just bridge and torque your body, and, you know, you hurt some of the cartilage between your ribs. Now you can't train. And if you can't train, now we're back up at point number one. You're never going to get any better because
Right.
you're not showing up because you can't train. So I think the injury part, it's a valid point in that the quality of your training, the way you train, can have a big impact on injuries. And what they're doing in the particular academy, like, you have to avoid certain techniques. So in John Danaher's academy, they do not allow jumping to full guard. Did you hear that, Dan? Do you know why they do that?
For injury.
Yeah, like, you can blow somebody's knee out. Like, it almost happened at training here the other day. Joe Munro is a big guy. He was training with this other big guy, and the other big guy tried to grab a guillotine and jump guard. And what can happen is the person getting guillotined, two people standing, if he backs his hips up a little bit, when your hips back up, your legs, your knees act kind of naturally straighten a little bit. Then when somebody jumps guard, their hips can come crashing down on your straight leg, which, you know, you could have a catastrophic knee injury. So never mind if somebody jumps and you just fall on your back, you could hurt yourself. Or you jump guard, full guard, and the guy falls and his head hits you in the face and knocks some teeth out or something. So he doesn't allow that, which is probably a smart thing to do. He doesn't allow kani pasami, which is like a scissor takedown, Dan, where you swing into it and essentially you're looking to get inside heel hook or something. But if somebody does that technique incorrectly, they can swing all their weight into the side of either your knee and blow your knee out, or your lower leg. So I think a couple of years ago, Jesse Gutierrez did it to Rory and, like, sprained Rory's ankle, like, pretty bad. We had to go to the hospital, and he had a boot on for a while. So, like, you really can't be doing those techniques in the academy.
I actually heard Danaher talk about this too, where jiu-jitsu in your academy, a lot of academies, it's sort of trained like a sport, a little more than like a, you know, bowing martial art kind of thing. So but there's still key differences, right? And so what Danaher was talking about was this: you can't use this pure like Olympic wrestling model, because there's different goals. Like, Olympic wrestler is to succeed at the highest level, you basically need to go full out all the time. And if you blow something out, too bad, it's next man in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
like,
a bit of a winnowing process.
Yeah,
We're starting with a large group of athletes, and it's like the Navy SEALs. And at the end, we're going to have a small elite group that happen to make it through.
Right.
They're all proven they're the best. Maybe there were some other really good guys that happened to get injured, so they didn't make the cut. But too bad. That's the way we're going to do it.
Right.
You know?
And you almost have to get to that, to world-class level.
Probably, yeah.
But that's not what's happening in a
No.
jiu-jitsu gym,
No.
right? It's not a winnowing process
No.
to get to the
And
you know.
it's not in the spirit of jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is the yielding art. We don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and jiu-jitsu ultimately is so technical in the sporting realm that you don't need to do any of that. You should be minimizing the risk of injury as much as you can. So that's part of it. Like, what techniques do they allow? What's the quality of training? And when you have a beginner, Dan, I don't want to bore people, but if they're doing positional training, there's fewer variables. So not only do they learn faster, they're way less likely to get hurt, too. Like, if you have two completely untrained people that start on their feet and they don't even know takedowns and they just go at it like a couple of hillbillies, I mean, the risk of injury is much higher than if you had them trained positionally.
Right.
And they're not going to learn as fast and so forth. So I think that point about injury is related to the quality of training, the structure of the training, and the energy the student is bringing to the training. Like sometimes you have to go hard if you're preparing to compete. But the beginners, they don't know anything at all to begin with. So they should not be probably going that hard.
Right. And even that has changed in the last at least 20 years, but 10 years, 5 years. We have people like Conor McGregor saying, I'm not sparring full out for, you know,
Max
like
Holloway didn't spar for his last
Yeah,
fight.
he didn't.
and
and he was amazing.
he was magnificent. He was better
Yeah.
than I've ever seen him.
It was just it
astounding.
makes sense. It was like,
Yeah.
it's training is evolving to where it's like, I don't want to get, I mean, I
Right.
know there's people who said this a long time ago. I remember Straight Blast saying it a long time ago, and,
Mhm.
Steve Whittier saying it a long time ago, where it's like, you're going to, especially a pro fighter is going to step up and fight. Like they're going,
Oh, right.
they don't need to get used to throwing full.
Right.
They're
Max Holloway doesn't need to toughen himself up.
Right,
He's
exactly. So
eternally
why does
tough,
he have
yeah.
to take thousands of punches
Yeah.
in training
Definitely.
for when he's going to do it anyway?
Yeah. Great point. All right, Dan, what's
Last
the
one.
last point?
And I almost hate to read this because it so clearly applies
Yeah.
to me. But it's, I don't want to read it.
That's really fun.
You've convinced yourself that you won't be good.
You've convinced yourself you won't be good.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Right.
Yeah,
I
you
totally
should not
have.
be doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and we said it's almost amazing to me how many people are like, I suck at jiu-jitsu. Like it's like I've known black belts that are like, I suck at jiu-jitsu.
Well, it's a very
it's just
it's a very key point, Dan, that you actually helped me narrow in on it. And I was thinking that a student has to progress in order to stay motivated and stay developing. And that isn't correct. The student has to recognize their development to stay motivated. So it's a little bit different. If you're developing and I'm your coach and I'm telling you and pointing out your development, but if you don't see it, if you don't believe it, then you can't stay motivated. And then then you're out. Sooner or later, then you're going to be out, which is completely reasonable. So that is huge. Yeah, you have to recognize your own development. If you recognize your development, then you won't believe that you'll never be good. You'll see, oh, I'm getting better. I'm better than I was last month. I'm better than I was last year. Even if I don't feel like I'm quote-unquote good enough, whatever that abstract idea is, I at least can see that I'm moving in the correct direction. I'm making progress.
right. But to bring it back to earlier point, isn't it? Maybe using myself an example, it was sort of like I don't see myself getting better against other people. You're saying this whole mindset change should be like, but I know I'm better at this pass, and I know I'm better at this escape, and I know I'm better at avoiding this submission and getting this submission. So then suddenly you're not even thinking about how am I doing against the other people.
That's
you're like
way better way to approach things. Yeah.
So then it's sort of like it doesn't even matter what's happening in the roles. It's like I know I'm getting better at these different assets.
And actually, that will maximize your potential. Because if you're only measuring yourself against your training partners, you could have stayed, Dan, at that karate place and been top dog to this day, just kicking the shit out of these karate guys, and you still wouldn't be that good. Granted, you would have had your purple belt from that guy from your 6 private lessons.
I don't know. I'd be like a red belt now, I guess.
You'd be a coral belt, but you wouldn't be nearly as good than what you did when you went to a real Brazilian jiu-jitsu place and trained there. So.
Right.
So that's the key thing. You don't want to rely just on measuring yourself against your training partners. You really want to look at yourself and your own development. It's a cliche. You want to be better than you used to be. You want to compete against yourself. That's the cliche. But you can only really do that if you look at the techniques in your technical development. Otherwise, how would you know that you're better or worse than you used to be?
Right.
And then the other thing about believing in yourself, I remember one time I was trying to pass somebody's guard, and it was really hard. And I'm like, wow, can't pass this guy's guard. And then I would never pass. And then one day I said, wait a minute. I started visualizing successfully passing their guard. And it sounds very woo-woo, right? But, yeah, then I passed their guard. Because sometimes if you have a belief that you can't do it, it can introduce enough hesitation into your performance that it actually degrades your performance where you can't do it.
I think it could be by a
Self-fulfilling.
lot. Because
Yeah.
I felt that even when there's someone who I can't pass, say it's you, there's like a lazy, like, I'm tired, I'll never pass John's guard effort. And then there's this like trying to imagine that I'm able to.
Mm-hmm.
And I can even even if I can't, it's like I can tell him you're having to ramp it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you'll
Definitely.
say something like that was harder, like you
Yeah.
were better. Like, you know what I mean? So
Right.
you can. I think it's striking the difference, because I'm also skeptical, and I'm like, oh, what difference is it going to make? Some mindset of like I can do it or I can't. But I think it does. Like, I think it really jumps out, even for a skeptic.
There's a psychologist from Harvard, I think Howard Gardner, who had something where he said 80% of motivation is your perceived success. Like, if you think you can, that's 80% of your motivation is that you believe you can be successful. I don't know how he came up with that number, how it's measurable, but it feels like he's at least in the ballpark, right?
And again, if outside jiu-jitsu, I can't you imagine. I think going into a meeting and being like, I'm going to crush it. Like, I would think you have much higher chance of success than like I'm gonna blow it.
You're at least going to
Yeah.
achieve your best performance that
Right.
way. If you go in thinking that you can't win, you can't be successful, it's going to be hard to get to your best performance. Yeah.
Again, I'm saying within bout, like a white belt's not going to visualize them passing your guard and do it, but they will be better.
Yeah, they will approach their own maximum potential better if they have a positive belief that they can achieve their outcome, for sure.
Right.
Dan, that was awesome. We had 5 reasons why you'll never be good at jiu-jitsu, and I think we actually came up with 5 or 10 reasons how you are going to get better, which is what our listeners and our viewers really want to hear anyways. So I'm sure they got a ton of value in this. I'm sure they're going to subscribe to this, and we'll see you next week. Love you guys.